Hello everybody! So I'm watching the Arrowverse for the very first time, and I've made it to the crossover event, Crisis on Earth X, so today, I'm going to talk about it. Let's go. So I definitely think that this crossover did a much better job at focusing on the crossover element of it, rather than the individual shows element of it, because I think the previous crossovers, the episodes inside of them felt like they were episodes of the show they were a part of first, and they just also happened to be part of this crossover. So, like, last crossover, Invasion, the Arrow episode felt much more like just an episode of Arrow that happened to just tie in to the larger Invasion crossover, but it felt much more like just an Arrow episode. There wasn't much really going on in it that dealt with the bigger overall crossover. But here, I feel like they don't really even focus on the individual shows at all. Like, I think, like the Supergirl episode, the first one in it, feels a lot more like a Flash episode. Like, the primary focus of it is Barry and Iris's wedding. And it really does not focus at all, well, not at all, but like, it doesn't focus a lot on Supergirl. Like, it doesn't feel like a Supergirl episode. It just feels like this is the first episode in the crossover. You know, it's only because that the Supergirl airs first in the order, you know, in the week. Supergirl episode comes first, so the first episode in the crossover has to be a Supergirl episode, and that's really the only reason why this is the first thing here, and why this is even on Supergirl. It's because Supergirl comes first, so it had to be the Supergirl one. Because again, it does not feel like a Supergirl episode. It focuses more on Flash stuff, Barry and Iris, even Arrow stuff, Oliver and Felicity. There's not much in it that focuses on Supergirl stuff. They do have, the one part where you're kind of getting Supergirl to go to the wedding, which it seemed like that was an odd thing. Like, I guess with what's happening on the show Supergirl, what was happening at that time, they felt like they needed to bridge the gap. Like, oh, she's going through this breakup with Mon-El or whatever, or something, and, she's not going to want to go to a wedding, so they had to kind of bridge the gap there, which I don't feel like needed to be bridged. So it felt like it was just a way too quick of a thing. Like, I'm not going to the wedding. Okay, I'll go to the wedding. I think that's a good idea. It's like, why did they do that? But, so that was a weird thing there. I think it just kind of, they felt like needed to bridge a gap that didn't really need to be bridged, but, anyway, first episode focuses a lot on Barry and Iris' wedding, and you really don't even get a lot of, like, the story of it until the end. Like, really, most of the episode is just their wedding. You're setting up their wedding, and then at the end, once you get to the actual wedding, it ends up getting attacked by the Crisis, by the, Nazi Earth X people. Now, even though it does focus a lot more on the crossover than it does the individual shows, it still focuses a little bit on that. Like, for instance, in the Arrow episode, that's when the rest of Team Arrow shows up. They don't show up until the Arrow episode, and for the DC's Legends of Tomorrow episode, the rest of the Legends don't show up until that episode, and also Stein's death is saved for that episode. I guess to keep that on DC's Legends of Tomorrow, not have that happen somewhere else. So it does kind of focus on the shows in that aspect, but it does a lot better at just focusing, letting it just be one entity of, like, this is crossover. This is one thing. It doesn't matter that Barry and Iris' wedding takes place in the Supergirl episode, and, well, actually technically takes place in the DC Legends of Tomorrow episode. It doesn't matter that it's not in a Flash episode. It's just, this is the crossover, this is the story we're telling. It's broken up into 4 parts, given to each of the shows, just because that's the order the shows come out in. There we go. We're not caring about making the Arrow episode really an Arrow episode. It's just, this is the Arrow. Arrow comes out second. This is the second part of the crossover. Goes to Arrow. Doesn't have to actually have to deal with Arrow. So now I think I should finally get into actually talking about the premise of the crossover, which is that the heroes have to go up against Nazi versions of themselves from another Earth. And yes, that does sound completely insane, but it's really cool. Of course, we have evil Oliver, evil Supergirl. We don't have evil Flash. For evil Flash, we have Eobard Thawne as well. And I guess this is the same one from season 1. Like, somehow he survived. That's what I got from this. That somehow Eobard Thawne as well survived the ending of season 1. And so he's back now. The only explanation they give is time travel, which is like, okay, but how? So I thought that was interesting. Not sure how that works exactly. Not sure if they're going to explore that more in Flash Season 4. But that was an interesting concept. I guess also they did that because they figured we had enough of Evil Barry last season with Savitar, so they were like, yeah, let's not do Evil Barry again, let's just do Eobard Thawne. I think that works better for the Evil Flash thing. And so we have Evil Oliver, Evil Kara, Evil Eobard Thawne, and Evil Oliver and Evil Kara are apparently married here. And I am fairly certain that that only happened because fans shipped them from Invasion, and so they figured, alright, we'll appease fans by having the evil versions of them be married, because we obviously can't have Oliver and Kara actually be together, because, you know, we're trying to do other love interests with them, but we could have, for Other Earth, evil versions, we could have them together, to give people the Oliver-Kara relationship, without actually having to do that. I'm convinced that is exactly what happened. Please tell me if I'm right or wrong, if that's how this worked out, that at the time people shipped them, and so they ended up being together here in the evil versions. Like, that's what. Please tell me if I'm right or wrong about that, because I'm fairly certain that must have been what happened, why they did that. But moving on to the actual relationship Oliver and Felicity, and we get some stuff with them here at Barry and Iris's rehearsal dinner. Oliver pretty much asks Felicity to marry him, and she says no. And so throughout the crossover, there's kind of some tension between them. There's kind of a conflict of, like, Oliver wants to get married, but Felicity doesn't, and we find out it's kind of because last time they were going to get married, Damien Dark had people attack their limousine, and then she found out that Oliver had a son that he lied to her about, and they ended up breaking off the engagement, and so she's like, yeah, we don't have a good history with getting married, so maybe not. But then by the end of it, Felicity does a complete 180 and decides to get married, and actually end up getting married during Barry and Iris's redo wedding, which I wasn't a big fan of that. I was kind of like, really? We're gonna do this, like, we're gonna do this in the middle of their wedding? Can't we just let Barry and Iris have their moment and then do the Felicity moment? Like, I'm fine having the Felicity moment happen here, but, like, just, can we, like, wait a little bit, not just have it happen in the middle of their wedding? Like, I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of that. I wish that they kind of spread it out, because it was like, oh, we're doing Oliver and Felicity and Barry and Iris at the same time, and I don't know. Yeah, I wish they spread it out a bit, at least let Barry and Iris get married, and then have Felicity say, oh, Diggle, why don't you marry us now also? But, I don't know. But it was cool that Diggle was the one that married them. I think that this was just kind of a way to get Diggle involved, get Diggle in the crossover, because he couldn't before, logically, like he couldn't, because of stuff happening in Arrow Season 6, he wouldn't have been able to be involved to actually fight, because, he had the whole thing with his arm going on, so this is a way to have him involved, without actually having to fight, to have him just be the one that marries Barry and Iris and Oliver and Felicity. It was cool to have another character so close to them, be the one to marry them, but it also just kind of seems like, oh yeah, by the way, Diggle, he's licensed to do this. Like, what? He is? What did we know this before? Okay, we're just doing this. We're gonna have Diggle marry them, so I felt like that was a bit of just like, yeah, Diggle can do this, but I thought it was still cool to have Diggle be the one that did that. Also, speaking of Arrow Season 6, even though it's been a while since I mentioned Arrow Season 6, but speaking of Arrow Season 6, I think that this crossover kind of messed up the flow of Arrow Season 6 a bit, because they kind of had to cut the whole Diggle being Green Arrow storyline short, because they needed to have, obviously they need to have Oliver be the Green Arrow for the crossover, and so they kind of had to figure out a way to have that plotline stop and have Oliver come back, and I think it kind of messed up the flow of it. I think I would have liked to have seen the Diggle as Green Arrow plotline continue further, but I think it ended up fine, but it was a little bit weird the way they had to kind of, in the 7th episode of Arrow Season 6, where they have to kind of just be like, okay, Diggle has the whole arm thing going on, so we have to have Oliver come back, and I don't know. It felt a little bit like the crossover messed up the flow. Moving on to, there's actually a plotline here that relates to Supergirl, where we have this plotline where Sarah Lance and Kara's sister have a one-night stand, and there was some funny stuff that happened with that. I think that there were some humorous moments that resulted because of that. There's also a nice moment in the Flash episode when they're on Earth X, and they have a nice moment where, because Kara's sister is afraid that Kara's gonna die, and Sarah comforts her, telling her how she lost her sister Laurel, and all of that. And so I think I might have been more invested in this story had I, watched Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow, but because I didn't, it was kind of, this plotline, it was the least interesting of the plot lines, but for me, inherently, because I don't watch the two shows that they're from. But I think because Sarah was originally on Arrow, I think that since there's the connection there where I know her character, I think that was why I enjoyed it a little bit more than I probably would have, even though it was still the lowest plotline here. I thought it was good enough. I think this was an interesting plotline that had some humorous moments and had a nice emotional moment. So, yeah, thought it was fine. We also get Snart back, Captain Cold, which, that was cool, no pun intended, to see him return, and it does seem like, I guess he was killed at some point on Legends of Tomorrow, and so they've been bringing him back in different ways, either by time travel or alternate Earths, and it just seems like, why did you kill him off if you were gonna need him later for things. Like, it just, I don't know, it seemed like a weird, seemed like that was a weird decision. Especially like me, like as a person who hasn't seen Legends of Tomorrow and just hearing, oh, Snart died, but seeing him come back, it's like maybe if I actually saw the moment happen, I'd be like, oh, I understand why they needed to have him die here. But it's like, why did you do that? And but it's still cool when we get to see him again. No pun intended. Moving on to something I mentioned earlier, Stein's death, Professor Stein's death, and I think they did a really good job with this. Of course, since I haven't seen Legends of Tomorrow, I wasn't like, I think that this didn't have as much of an emotional weight as it would have had I seen it, but I think they still did a good job at displaying this. Like, I think I was still like, wow, they're killing him, no, like, and I think, because there's a plot line, well, they start out, I guess this is a plot line from Legends of Tomorrow that they're continuing where Stein is planning on retiring from the Legends, and Jax, the other half of Firestorm, is like, well, I want to continue to be on Legends of Tomorrow and stuff. So, but it's not really just that. At first Stein thinks, oh, you just want to keep being the legend on the Legend of Tomorrow team, so you could have powers too. He makes him some serum to give him powers. And he's like, no, it's not just being on the Legends. It's that you are a father figure to me, and so I like that they explored that, the whole father-son relationship between Stein and Jax. I think they did a good job with that. And so, eventually, when they go to Earth X, Stein ends up being shot, and the only reason that he continues to stay alive is because of his connection to Jax. And so, eventually, Stein has to convince Jax to give him the serum, and the serum that Cisco created that will break their connection, and Stein will die and Jax will survive, because what was happening is that because of the connection, Stein dying was also killing Jax, and so Stein had to sacrifice himself to save Jax and break their connection. And I thought that, again, I think they did that well, making this a really emotional moment, even for me as somebody who hasn't seen Legends of Tomorrow. I think similar to the Sarah and Kara's sister plotline, I think even though I haven't seen Legends of Tomorrow, because Professor Stein and Jax were introduced on The Flash, there's the connection there that I still have the connection to Professor Stein's character, knowing his character and Jack's character, and also just seeing them in the Invasion crossover too. Just kind of already having experience with their characters outside of Legends of Tomorrow. I think that's what allowed this moment to to have much more weight to it than it would have if I didn't have that connection. But even without that, I think they still did a good job at just conveying that, the severity of that moment. But then, moving on to kind of what the Earth X evil heroes' whole plan is that basically evil Nazi Kara is dying, and she needs good Supergirl Kara's heart. She needs to steal her heart, not in that way. She needs to take her heart and have like a heart transplant, and that will allow her to survive. Obviously, in doing that, they have to kill Kara, and that's kind of the main plot line here. That's the main conflict, is that they need to save Kara. And I think it was cool to have a plotline in here really revolve around Supergirl rather than the last crossover invasion, where she's just kind of there. This time, there's an integral plot of the crossover that relates to Supergirl. And I like that they did that. But moving on to the final battle, Stein is apparently the motivation for this, as if saving the world from evil Nazis from another Earth wasn't enough of a motivation. They're like, we're gonna do it for Professor Stein, like, and the rest of Earth too, but yeah, for Professor Stein. And so they go, they have the big battle. Oliver and Kara fight their evil counterparts. Barry fights Reverse Flash, Eobard Thawne. Oliver and Kara, their counterparts end up dying. Kara's evil Nazi self ends up exploding because all of the nuclear energy or whatever builds up inside and she explodes. And Oliver just ends up flat out killing his other self, which is like, I thought you were doing no killing thing. But I guess if it's an evil Nazi version of yourself, it's okay. Barry, he ends up letting Reverse Flash go. And I guess that will be explored more later. And then, of course, everybody else just fights the rest of the army because they don't have evil counterparts. And I want to point out there's this very funny line that Wells from Earth 2 says, where he's talking to Supergirl and he's telling her where to fly her evil self to because she's going to explode. And he says,
"You need to fly her up, and away, now."
I thought that was a very funny line to throw in there. And yeah, overall, I think this crossover was really good. Of course, the rest of the finale is basically just everybody going back to their own shows. Barry and Iris and Oliver and Felicity getting married, and as I already mentioned that before, I think that this crossover was really great. I think this, once again, I think this felt much more like it was a crossover first and the episodes second. Again, like I said before, the other crossovers felt like they were just the episodes of the shows that also fit into the crossover. But with this, it really feels like it's just one entity. It's really just a movie. It's like a 3-hour movie broken up into 4 parts, given to Supergirl, Arrow, Flash, and DC's Legends of Tomorrow. And it's only in the order that it's in because that's the order that they are released in on the CW. And so I think that's why this worked a lot better. It was just, we're bringing all of the characters in for this one story where they have to fight evil versions of themselves from another Earth, evil Nazi versions of themselves, which, again, that's a crazy idea, but it's so cool, and they did a really good job with it. Also, I like that this concept, it kind of came from the explanations of other Earths that I think Stein did, and I know Barry, when he was describing the concept of other Earths to Kara when he first went to Kara's Earth in that one Supergirl episode, the way he explains it, one example he gives is maybe there's one Earth where the Nazis won World War II.
One where the Nazis won World War II.
That's what this stems from. That one line in the Supergirl episode, I think in the Flash episode when Stein's describing alternate Earths, where it's like this just throwaway line that's just, oh, here's an example of something that could happen on another Earth. That's what this is. This is, we are seeing, what if that Earth where the Nazis won World War II, what if they came to attack Earth 1? That is cool. And I always like when movies and shows do that, where they take this one throwaway line and make a whole story off of it. Like the Star Wars. Obi-Wan in A New Hope says, "Oh, we fought in the Clone Wars," and from that was the animated Clone Wars show. I like when things like that happen, where there's just a throwaway line that becomes something bigger. And so, yeah, I think, again, this crossover was great. I think they really did a good job at making this one big story where everybody comes together to fight a common threat. It was even better than the Invasion crossover, because once again, that felt like it was catering more to the shows that were in it rather than the over making it just one crossover. So I think this again worked a lot better, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the Arrowverse crossover event Crisis on Earth X. Please comment below your thoughts on it and of the video, and remember to give this video a like, subscribing to the channel, and maybe check out some of my other videos. And with that said, that's a wrap.